going to make these two. Notice that we're kind of carrying the orange, or the yellow and the orange into here, and it's getting darker. So that's kind of how they progress, okay? Another color from here will progress into next month. We're going to make the Louisiana block first, so this is the video for the Louisiana block. Okay, in your packet for the Louisiana block, this is what you should have. You should have 3 strips. They're all 2 inches wide. Okay, all of them are 2 inches wide. We're going to be cutting the orange ones into pieces that are 2 inches by 3.5 inches, and the white one into squares that are 2 by 2. So I'm going to cut enough just to make one. We're going to end up constructing just one of these. Okay, this unit is known as a flying geese. So we make 4 flying geese, and then we attach them to these rectangles and then sew them together. So the first thing we're going to do is cut up our strips. Okay, remember that if we don't cut properly, we're never going to end up with the proper sizes. Now, I told you these are 2-inch wide strips, but you be sure and check and make sure that your strips are 2 inches wide. And this one is. Okay, now I'm going to cut one. You need to actually cut 4, but I'm only going to cut 1 right now. I'm going to cut 1 2 by 3.5 inch wide strip. Need a little more room. Okay, so 3.5 inches, 1, 2, 3.5. And then I'm going to make sure that my ruler is squared up here exactly, see, on the 2 here and the 3.5 here. Okay, and cut that. So there's one of my rectangles. And that we're going to put aside because we sew that on at the end. Now I'm going to cut a rectangle from the light orange color. Okay, you will actually cut 4 rectangles of each. Okay, again, here's 3.5. And I'm going to line it up so that it's on the 2 and the 3.5. To be over just a little more. I'm checking to be sure that it's 2. 1, 2, 3.5. I'm going to cut that. This is what I'm going to use to construct the flying geese unit. Okay, now, you're going to need 8 2 by 2 inch squares. But I'm only going to cut 2 because I'm just going to construct one flying geese unit for you to see. And again, look, I'm lining up these 3 sides on my ruler, so I know this piece is nice and square. Okay, so now I have this. I'm going to turn this into my flying geese, and then I'm going to sew it to this. Okay, to do flying geese, we have to draw diagonal lines from corner to corner on the back of each of the square pieces. Okay, if you've ever tried to make flying geese before and they just don't work out, my guess is that the designer didn't have the ratio correct. So don't despair. I'm telling you the ratio is correct on here. I like to draw the diagonal lines by lining up my corners on a line on my mat and then putting my ruler in line with that. And that gives me a little room to wiggle here. And then I draw my line. Okay, I am going back and forth with my pen, but very lightly. Okay, so see, corner to corner. And I need to do another one because we need 2 squares for a flying geese unit. The other thing is, I'm lining up my corners exactly with these lines, but my ruler I'm lining up to the left of the line so that when I leave some room for the width of my pen mark. Okay? So exactly corner to corner, exactly corner to corner. Okay, now you make your flying geese with this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this on, and I'm going to line these up exactly on 3 sides here. See here? Exactly together, and now I'm going to sew on that line. Okay? So we're going to go to the machine, and I'm going to sew on the line. Okay, remember your stitch length should be 1.8. And it's very important that you have this lined up exactly with the edges here. All right, the other thing is I'm going to lower my needle down into that line, and I want it to be into the fabric. No air sewing here. If you air sew, the chances are that your fabric will end up crunched here, and you don't want it to be crunched as you sew. So I want to start in the fabric. Hang on, my foot pedal's a little behind me here. Okay, and sew slowly, because you want to sew exactly on that line, and you want to hit exactly at the corner when you get to the other end. Okay? All right. Now, to check if this worked, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this up, and I'm going to push all this fabric back. Okay? So that this is going to end up being my corner. This is going to end up being cut off. So I'm going to pull that down. And what I'm looking for is that I have a straight line here, and that I have a corner here. Don't worry about this fabric. Ignore it. You're looking, it's as if you re-sewed a corner onto this fabric. Okay, so I have a straight line here, and I have a corner here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to trim this seam to 1/4 inch. And I'm going to tell you it's easier to trim it now because I have my friction pen line on there. So it's easy to line it up with the 1/4 inch. If you get rid of your friction pen line, then it's hard to see the line that you stitched on. All right, and what you're going to do is you're going to press first as you sewed to get it all nice and flat, and then you're going to press this open. When you do that, it should look like, even though it's 2 colors, it should look like one original rectangle. The rectangle should be exactly lined up. Okay, now, the second one goes on like this, so that the white makes a crisscross up here. And this is where, if the designer didn't do the ratios correctly, you'll never get this to come out. Because what you want to happen is where these cross should be a 1/4 inch down. So that should be your 1/4 inch seam allowance right there. So now we're going to line up again exactly. Ignore this, don't worry about it. Just line this up so that this meets up right here together, a continuous line, and that your corner is together right here. And now we're going to sew on that line. Be sure that we keep the seam allowance open. All right. Make sure everything's lined up. Don't start if it's not lined up. Actually want my thread out. I don't have anything to, there. Want my thread out and held back. All right, again, I'm going to put my needle down in close to the corner, but I want it in the fabric. I don't want it just starting off in the air there. Actually, don't like where that's. Okay, I'm starting at that corner, and I'm going to sew. And again, sew slowly, because you really want to sew exactly on that line, because you want those nice straight lines to form that flying geese. Okay. Again, we're going to check it. Okay, and remember, pull this down, but don't pay attention to this. You're paying attention that your corners meet up. You have a straight line here, and this should be 1/4 of an inch down. And that's a perfect flying geese unit. Okay, we're going to trim this off. Okay, I'm putting my friction pen line right on the 1/4 inch. And I'm going to trim this off. Okay, and again, I'm going to press this open. I'm going to press it first like I sewed it, and then I'm going to press it open. And then I'll show you another way to tell if your flying geese unit is correct. If it is, when you open these seams, look, this should be lined up. This seam allowance, the line on it should line up with this seam allowance line, this seam line. Okay? Now, I'm going to use a little bit of the folding pen here to get these all to lay nice and flat. But I'm a little heavier where we have more thickness coming together. Okay. A bit of a mess there. Okay, flip it over and make sure everything's laying nice and flat. Now there. Now you need to make 3 more of these. Okay, so you'll have a total of 4. Okay, then the next step after you have 3 more of these is to take the dark orange unit and you're going to sew these together. Okay, and I'm going to sew from this side because I want to be sure that I hit right here, just barely above that point. So if I sew from this side, I can see that as I do it. And look, my edges are all coming together. When I say that, I don't mean just these edges, I mean these as well. Okay, so we're going to go back and we're going to do a 1/4 inch seam there. Okay, and again, I don't want to air sew. I want to start so I'm just barely in the fabric. Okay? And remember, this is a scant 1/4 inch. So if you need to, before you begin this unit, you need to put, look at Marty Michelle's video again and go over what a 1/4 inch and make sure that you're getting a perfect scant 1/4 inch on your machine. And don't worry about back stitching because you're going to sew these together with other units. Okay, now, right here, I'm just above that little point. See my stitches? All right, so that should mean that when I open it up, I see the point of my flying geese unit. Okay? Now, you need to make 4 more of these, or 3 more. You'll have 4 of these, and you have 4 of these, and you're going to sew them together like this. Then, we're going to take a look at the back side of this. Okay? I pressed all of these. Lay it down? Okay. I pressed all of these toward the orange. I didn't. This one I didn't, sorry. But they should have all been pressed toward the orange. I just noticed that one's pressed open. So press all of these toward the orange because this is where the thickness is. And if I press it open, then I'm pressing the point of the flying geese unit back on itself, which makes it very thick. If I press it toward the orange, it lays much flatter. So all of these will get pressed that way. Then you sew 2 of these together and 2 of these together, and then make 1 go this way, 1 go that way, so they nest to sew them together to complete your square, and then the final seam allowance you'll press open.
Okay, everything lays nice and flat. And you should have a 6.5 inch square when you are done. If you don't, come on into the shop for some help. Remember that the sew along is the last Friday of the month. Do we know the date, Megan? Okay, the last Friday of the month from 1 to 7. Join us at 1, 3, or 5 o'clock, and we will be here to help you. Okay, come back. We'll do the framed plus block in just a minute.